one of the big misconceptions, of course, you hear all the time, whole life is a scam, infinite banking concept is a scam, when in fact, there is nothing that is more solid, stable, disciplined, full of stewardship, providing for your loved ones. I mean, it's got a lot of virtues behind it. I was working with a potential client and we were looking at all their financials, and I realized these people make almost 3 times as much money as I make, but I feel wealthier. Why is that?
Well, thank you for joining us on the Infinite Banking Initiative. Why don't you start off by telling us your story and your journey of how you discovered the infinite banking concept?
Well, first, let me just say thank you so much for giving me the honor of actually being on here. I really appreciate that. And because it's a pleasure speaking with you guys, and I really appreciate all that you're doing here. In some ways, my story, I feel like almost patterned after Nelson's story, which is really interesting since I never knew him. But it started with crisis in my life. Several things that happened. One, I wound up divorced after 25 years of marriage with 7 children. And when you're in that position, you don't expect that in your future. So having been a stay-at-home mom all my life, I suddenly was like 25 years behind the curve with working and trying to catch up and figuring out how in the world I was going to survive the rest of my life with suddenly less income. So there was that. My brother unexpectedly passed away. He was one who had basically, to my way of thinking at the time, he had always done everything right financially, according to all of the traditional things that you're supposed to do. We thought he was the smartest one in the family. And he wound up, so he did the buy term and invest the difference. And the year he retired in that January, he canceled his insurance because surely you don't need it after that, now that you're retired and you have your 401k. August, he's getting his house ready for sale, and he suddenly can't walk across the living room floor without being out of breath. He's diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He's gone by October. And that really shook me up a little bit. In fact, I remember very specifically when we were there for his memorial, we were downstairs in a room that he had just totally renovated, getting it ready for sale. And there'd been these silver coasters sitting on the bar that he had down there. And I don't remember exactly what they said, but it was something along the lines engraved with like Florida Bound 2014. And of course, that was what was supposed to happen. And I remember looking at my daughter and we saw these things. We were like, man, you just can't like live for one day. Someday it might never come. You know, he had spent 40 years driving truck, gone Monday through Friday, working really hard, only home on the weekends with his wife and kids. And then to have that happen, I mean, it was just like kind of a shake you up. Really made me think, like, is this really the way we should be thinking? Like, we've got to actually start living a little bit more today as well. Can't just put off everything for the future. I guess that was kind of the big lesson there for me. And then shortly after that, a few years later, my parents passed away. Now, they were older, 89 and 90. So this wasn't entirely unexpected, but I think the lesson for me there was these were people who worked very hard, had their own business. I was brought up in the restaurant business. They were very successful in that business while we had it running. But at the end of their life, there was really nothing to show for it. And we had to pay down, you know, we had to spend the last little bit of money that they had to pay their funeral expenses just so we could get them nursing care. So they were basically died penniless, you know, and that was just, I don't know, all of those things combined started making me think, there's got to be a different way to do things. And I don't want my kids to go through this kind of thing, and have these kind of losses with no plan. And so it really got me to searching. Of course, I was already concerned about my own situation with being divorced, now single, 7 kids, still some of them teenagers at home. That was fun. I didn't set out to do that by myself. Oh my goodness. But There's a whole lot of story there. But that was what got me looking into real estate, because I suddenly realized that I didn't have 40 years in front of me to do what they typically tell you to do, to save up a nest egg, to have this pile of money that you were then going to be able to live off of. I just didn't have that time. So I started looking at, well, I guess I need to have some monthly cash flows instead. And I realized that through real estate, I could accomplish that. So I went into that, and I spent a couple of years. I bought my first piece of real estate using every penny to my name with a home equity line of credit. Bought an ugly little house full of mold. It was a mess. My oldest son and I rehabbed that thing top to bottom. So we spent 6 months in that house. I mean, new roof, new windows, gutted it, new kitchen, new bathroom, the whole 9 yards. We had a major education that year. He was pretty handy though, so fortunately that was great. And we did do well with that. And before we actually got the money back from that one, I ended up doing another one through a private lender. Anyways, but we worked very hard for an entire year. We were rehabbing 2 properties. And so I'm working full time. So is he. We're coming home 5 o'clock, working till 10 o'clock, working on the weekends. I mean, it was a little bit nuts. But that whole time I was working in those houses, painting walls and whatever I was doing, I was listening to YouTube University. And I had already kind of really gotten the real estate piece down, but I started listening to stuff about money and how money works. And of course, I was getting an education of it at the same time, just hands-on doing what I was doing. And I think somewhere, I always try to pinpoint, like, what was the day when I actually finally heard about the infinite banking concept? And I remember putting in the app. So I had kind of heard about velocity banking. And I remember putting in the search on YouTube, velocity banking. Well, somewhere, I don't know, the Lord of the algorithms brought up infinite banking. I was like, what is this? So I started listening to some of that, and I got a copy. I heard about Nelson. I saw his documentary, which was amazing to me. And I got a copy of his book, and I read the book, and then I started searching for who knows Nelson. And that led me to James Neathery. So the rest is history, as they say, right? So I called up James Neathery's office, and Julie Neathery answered, and she was just as sweet as pie. And I was like, these are my people. And the next thing you know, I got myself a policy and got started that year. So that's kind of how it got started. So it's kind of a crazy long story, but.
That's I don't want to say wonderful story because it's filled with heartache, you know. But it got you here. So I'm glad you found IBC, you know, I really am. So.
Me too. Honestly, the lessons that I've learned, I would not trade for the world. Coming through all of that, even with the grief, you know, it was good stuff. Definitely changed the trajectory of, I believe, my future and my children's future and my grandchildren's future forever.
So you became a client of James, who, you know, was very close to Nelson, had a great relationship with Nelson, and definitely knew him, you know, personally, and you know, talked to him all the time and had him on his podcast. And so, you know, he was a great resource for you and a great advisor for you to connect with. What made you make the jump from being a client to becoming a IBC practitioner?
Because I kept telling everybody about it, and I kept sending so many clients to James that after a while I was like, I love this. Like, this has really become a passion of mine, and I couldn't help but get excited about it. And I was like, I might as well do this. Like, I had gotten into real estate as an investor. I'd gotten into real estate as an agent. And, you know, I still love all of that, but this just sparked something more. And so I knew, I was like, I got to do this. So finally I did. I went to James. I said, would you help me learn how to do it? So yeah, that's what started it. So I have several people that I have taken over the servicing for now that I am an agent, that went to James in the beginning.
I don't want to speak out of turn, but James doesn't always say, "Yeah, I'll help you." So good for you.
Where he really excels is when he's gotten on a call with me with a client or something, and boy, he knows his stuff. He knows it very, very well, and I still learn something every time I listen to him. So same as reading the book, right?
Well, he obviously saw something in you, so that's great. That's a wonderful story of getting to where you are today. So, you've shared a little bit about the struggles that led you to that point in your life. How has IBC impacted your life since then?
Well, I've been practicing it for myself now for 6 years. So I've gotten to that point where things are getting just a little bit exciting. It's kind of when that water starts to turn to steam, just broaching that right now. So that has helped me tremendously. And I would say the biggest thing for me that has, besides helping other people, really changing my own financial well-being. And I would say, it has really become more and more apparent to me that one of the biggest things, I had this kind of aha moment even recently, where I was working with a potential client and we were looking at all their financials, and I realized these people make almost 3 times as much money as I make, but I feel wealthier. Why is that? It's because I have access to capital. I have control. They had all this money. They couldn't touch any of it. So they couldn't do the things that they needed to do. And that was just kind of an eye opener that even if I'm only at the cusp of where it's beginning to cash flow. So, the amount of premiums I've put in, I haven't actually seen access to all of it, but I still have so much more access now. And of course, it's changed my habits, my discipline, all of those things, right, for the better. But it's incredible how much freedom that gives you, just that access and control. And I think that's the piece that's missed by a lot of people when they're looking at it and saying, well, this is a lousy investment. Well, of course, it's not an investment, right? But it is access and control. And what a distinction that has made. It's also, completely reduced my stress levels. There was definitely, after divorce and all of those things, a lot of fear of the future. So that has become like I'm enjoying life. I'm not worried about the future. I know that things are going in a better direction, and every single year they're only going to get better. That is a huge, change in your perspective, which changes the stressors in your life. As Nelson always said, right? It's a peaceful, stress-free way of life. So I feel like I'm starting to garner some of that as well. And I'm just loving the journey, and I'm loving helping other people start this journey. So it's just been really exciting for me. It's been huge.
Yeah, I know you're really committed because you attend all our training events, and you're always looking to learn from anybody you can from. So that's, you're like the model IBC practitioner in my mind, because you're fully committed to it, and you want to be the best you can possibly be to help people, and obviously there's the more people you help, the more income you're going to get also, obviously. So it's just a win-win for everybody. But I say this all the time, and Leigh tell me to be quiet next time I bring it up. But from my perspective, everybody, in order for you to get better, and for me to get better, and for Leigh to get better, then we need to keep the dialogue going, and we need to learn from each other. And we need to bounce ideas back and forth and try to help each other as much as we can, so we can build a community. And I know you're a Christian, and I think that's just part of the Christian ethos also, man. It's just that's what we need to be doing together. So.
Speaking of that, let me just say about both the think tank and the coaching academy, those have been pure gold for me. And sometimes I've even worried that I've tried to learn from too many people. I don't want to be a leech. But seriously, though, it hasn't been that way at all. People have been so helpful. And I have learned so many things from so many different people. It seems like everybody has something different a little bit to bring to the table. From somebody, I might learn a little bit more about marketing the business and helping, me learn how to get out there and share this. And somebody else might be helping me more with policy structure and design and all of the different things. But the people I have met through the Nelson Nash Institute have been absolutely fabulous. I have several now that I would consider dear friends, right? That we have just become. I mean, I've got several that I hop on Marco Polo with on the regular, daily almost. Hey, how's it going? I have another group on Voxer. We call ourselves the newbie practitioners. Now that's changing. We're not as newbie, but when we started, that's what we named it, right? And it's just been fun because sometimes we have a question that we might just be afraid to ask someone else, but we're like, do you know the answer to that? We can get a quick answer. It's just been, I can't even tell you how much those relationships have been just key to feeling like you're not alone, knowing you've got someplace to go to get the answers and to support you along the way. Yes, that has been. And as speaking to the Christian perspective piece too, I'll never forget, we had a group of us leaving the Institute, the think tank, in Orlando, headed to the airport. And I think there were 5 or 6 of us. We were crammed into a vehicle anyways to get to the airport. And we were laughing and we were having the best time and having such good discussions. And we all got out of there feeling like, didn't you feel like we just went to church together? Like there was such great intimate fellowship and just good time together. And I don't even remember what the conversation was, but it was bar none so good. I just love that.
Think tank's supposed to be, plugging in, okay? And, Nelson coined, the lone wolf syndrome. Like you feel like you're the lone wolf, so where's your support system? And I'm not just talking about the infinite banking concept. I'm talking about, life in general, right? We have different support systems, whether it be church or neighborhood community or family or whatever. It's just so critically important. And going back to the practitioner program real quick, from what, this is a paid political announcement on my part. The students that never get there, okay, or the practitioners that kind of wander off and we never hear from them, I go back and check if they're plugged in or not. And typically they're not. They don't plug into the community either virtually or live, through the different training events or whatever to get that support and get that sense of working together and be successful together. So, so that's why I said you're the model practitioner because you're plugged in 100%. So.
Well, it's been fun to do that. I plan to stay right there, plugged in. Trust me. It's been good.
IBC is, smoke and mirrors, the golden ring. Life insurance is the best thing on the planet. Put $1 in and get $1 million out, blah, blah, blah. No. It's hard work, right? It's long-term commitment. But if you get that thing off the ground, man, you can fly it to the moon. But you just need to stick with it. So there you go.
I know you said you're relatively new in this space and as a practitioner, but have you had any interactions with clients you've seen this really impact their lives?
Well, yeah, I have actually, even though, all of my clients are going to be new in this too, right? 2 years or less. But I can honestly tell you, I've had a couple of clients who have done a great job of taking over some credit card debts or different things and being able to get on a good plan of recapturing that interest. Probably one of the, most significant stories though is from a real estate investor who, this gentleman has many doors of real estate, 20 something, I believe, and had a situation where he had been flipping so many and doing so much with his financials that the bank didn't want to let him refinance some of his properties and access his equity. his credit score had gone too low because it's all about the credit score. So we looked at his policy, used some of his money to pay off some of those debts that he had to some other lenders. Now it's private. Now he qualifies, and boom, he went forward. And it was like, I mean, he was just like, Trisha, this is amazing. Like, I would have never been able to do this. This is so incredible. And that happened. He'd only been in a year, but he had enough cash value there. Now he had a significant policy, but he had enough there to make that happen so that the banks would then play nice with him again. And now his goal is to not have to be beholden to them and he's been working with hard money lenders, which is very expensive. And he's so excited that he's seeing that, I think now he's approaching his, third premium. So he's getting to that place where he's like, I am never going back to them again. So interesting that someone, even with that kind of net worth, that kind of property ownership, it doesn't matter. When the guidelines are just all about your credit score or whatever it is, that doesn't check the box for the bank, you can be stuck, even with a lot of net worth. So, like, net worth doesn't buy you breakfast, right? So that's been an interesting one for sure. And I guess we're just kind of, I'm at this point, I'm just also just holding hands and kind of coaching a lot of people along the way. It's one of my favorite things. If there was any complaint I have, it would be they don't call me often enough. I tell them, I'm like, please call me. Don't sit and wonder. Like, let's talk about this. It's my favorite thing to do. It's like I'm a kid in a candy store if you call me and ask me questions about infinite banking.
That's great. No, that's what I'm sure they love having you there on their side and, as a great resource for them as they navigate, life and, what's the best decision moving forward on things. So I love to hear that. What were some of the bigger challenges that you faced when you first started IBC?
One of the mental blocks for me, although I'm not going to say this held me back, I'm a bit aggressive when I find something and I'm excited about it. So it didn't hold me back, but there was kind of one little fear, I guess, that kind of nagged at the back of my mind when I first started this that I don't know if I've heard too many people talk about before, but it was this idea that I'm putting my money into a whole life insurance policy that I'm never going to see again. Because I was told, right, it's going to go in there, it's going to compound uninterrupted, and you're never going to touch it again. Somehow that was almost like a little bit fearful. Like when you put money in the bank, you think you can go and take it back out. You don't realize that the bank isn't just holding your money there waiting for you. But somehow this idea that from now on, I'm going to have to borrow against that in order to access my money. That was kind of the fear. And it wasn't even so much that I had to borrow against it and pay interest. Like some people say, why in the world would you want to pay interest to access your own capital? I know that's a huge question. But for me, it was just this idea that I'm putting it in there, never to see it, never to touch it again. And once I realized, though, that it's kind of the same thing when you work with a bank, when you put your money in the bank, it's not really your money anymore either. And they're not as certain and as stable as the life insurance company. That kind of settled me down a little bit. But that was one of the first like kind of mental hurdles that I had to get past. But other than that, I would say that I feel like I caught on to it pretty quickly in large part. So if you remember, I was saying I was kind of getting into real estate and I'd done a lot of learning in that space. And I had followed Brandon Turner with Bigger Pockets. And he always said, when you buy a piece of rental real estate, it's like a little oil well that is just going to keep pumping continuously for the rest of your life. You're going to get that mortgage pay down. You're going to get the rent coming in and the rent's going to go up and the mortgage is going to go down, but it's going to keep that cash flow coming in just like that little faithful oil well. Well, that idea transferred really easily for me into this idea. Because now, every time I have a policy, I feel like I have the same sort of thing. It's this little oil well that's going to keep pumping constantly for the rest of my life. Now, it takes a little bit of time to, capitalize that, but so does real estate. right? You're putting a down payment. You're not getting that down payment out of there right away. It takes time to get those cash flows coming in that are going to recoup that initial capitalization phase. So once I kind of gathered that, then it was like, oh, this is a little bit similar with no tenants and no toilets, right? So then I got so into this, I kind of left the real estate behind, and of course you can do both, which is great. But that really helped me to see this in a different light. And then it was like, okay, so I've got one policy. And I'll be honest, when I got my first one from James, I don't know how he thought I was ever going to pay that kind of premium. So it took my breath away, and I thought, oh my word, how am I going to do this?
You said, okay, I need a policy. So he goes, okay, let me roll the dice. How much can I get? Right.
I mean, he saw me doing real estate. I think he thought I was, a lot further along than I felt like I was. But funny thing, because once I really grasped a hold of this, the very next year, I opened up my second one and never thought about the fact that my premiums are due within a week. So I kind of did that one to myself, and it has just happened. And I still sometimes don't know how I'm paying this much premium. I really, truly, sometimes I'm just like, wow, where did this come from? But I've managed that, and I'm on to a third.
Well, you're in three professions now. You're a real estate entrepreneur, plus you're a authorized practitioner, and the third one is you're a banker. So, and that working three jobs enable you to fund at least three policies, right?
Probably. Yeah, I was thinking there's a few more, but some of them are not owned. Well, they're owned by me, but they're going to my kids. So, they're paying for those. So anyways. With 7 children, you have a whole lot of opportunity to increase your portfolio. That is true. That is true. But you also need a lot of death benefit that's going to be shared among 7 children. So, it's kind of commensurate. And that, honestly, that is one of the neatest things for me that I never, like, talking about how it's changed my life. The fact that as a single mom, I could actually leave my children one day in a better position because of what I've done now, like, that just thrills me. I would have never dreamed that I could do that. It truly, truly excites me. And I have 6 grandbabies so far, and I am looking forward to helping every single one of them. That just is thrilling to me.
And like I'm saying, you can make a career from just the family.
Well, and I will tell you, it's great for family banking. They all have financing needs. And those of them who have really caught on to this have started to participate in that too, which is really cool. So several of them have policies of their own. Several of them have borrowed against my policies and are using it for things like car purchases and whatnot. And, that's all contributing to more premium. And so it's working out great, keeping it all in the family. I love it. One of them has one. 2 more are getting ready to have them. But my oldest granddaughter, she has one. I keep telling her, but she hasn't really figured this out yet. And we have to do some teaching. But I'm like, you have your own banking system too. You'll get it one day. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about, Gigi.
Yeah, but she will be so grateful one day. When that light bulb goes on, she will definitely be appreciative of it. Well, so, you talked about your challenge that you had to overcome. What are some other misconceptions that you hear when you're talking to people about the infinite banking concept, and how do you address those misconceptions?
Well, I'll tell you, recently it has one of the big misconceptions, of course, you hear all the time. Whole life is a scam. Infinite banking concept is a scam. And I recently had someone, I don't want to say close to me, but an acquaintance in my area come to me and basically call it a scam and send me the typical, complaints about it, that it's a waste of money and all of that. And I said something about, well, I hope not. And this was a fellow believer. And I said, well, I hope not all Christians think this or whatever. But, and the retort was, this has nothing to do with religious beliefs. This is neutral. And I, I thought about that more and more. And I was like, really? Is it neutral? And I'm not saying you have to be a Christian to do infinite banking, right? Or to purchase whole life or anything of the sort. But I think it's really a shame that the perception is that it's a scam when in fact there is nothing that is more solid, stable, disciplined, full of stewardship, providing for your loved ones. I mean, it's got a lot of virtues behind it. And so I'm really wanting to kind of take this message out there, because, and the fact that whole life insurance was actually started by the Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia in 1717 with a fund for pious uses. And then it was specifically designed to take care of their ministers. And if their ministers passed away, then the funds would go to the widows and the children. I mean, how much more according to scripture is that? So I feel like there's this huge, virtuous undergirding of whole life insurance that it just absolutely breaks my heart that the mantra that has been foisted upon the very church that started this, and I don't mean by the Presbyterian Church, but I mean the church at large, is that it's a scam. And I just want to help people dig under the hood a little bit and take a deeper look at kind of the worldview thinking that lies underneath whole life insurance and the infinite banking concept, even Austrian economics and all of that lines up more scripturally than the system that most people are engaged in, which is based on dishonest weights and measures. It's based on fraud and deceit and debt. And I mean, really? I mean, it kind of, the more I learn about it, the more I just feel like it's so inside out from reality. And I want to help people see that. That's really my goal.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's great stuff. It's fundamental. Who doesn't want to take control of their finances? Why would you want to usurp your control to a government entity or somebody else who is quote unquote has your best interests in mind when they're making a ton of money in the process? Yeah. By the way, there's nothing wrong with the Presbyterian Church, by the way.
No, I mean, as a fellow Presbyterian, when I found that out, I didn't know that until after I had my license a little ways in. I think I only learned that like in this last year. I was like, wow, that's something I can be really proud of. Like, good for them. They stepped up to the plate and took responsibility and care for their own people. Isn't that what we ought to be doing? This is private. It's not dependent on government. It's private individuals coming together for mutual support. What can be better than that?
Well, going back to becoming your own banker, when you first read that, what was your initial thought?
My initial thought was, where in the world is this going? This was so confusing. I was like, why are we talking about grocery stores and airplanes? And I'm a little bit lost. I had to read it so many times, and I know every time I read it, I still learn something new. But it's like you have to, even after I started, I remember feeling like I have leaky holes in my bucket of my brain or something. I would think I got a hold of it, and then a couple months later, I'd be like, wait a minute, why am I doing this? What is happening here? Even though I was started in it, it took a while. So yeah, I would go back and I'd reread, or I'd have to listen to more podcasts or whatever it was. And it just seemed to be such a foreign idea that it was hard to grasp. But it seems like you get to this place though, where you suddenly turn a corner. And at least it did for me, where now all of a sudden, oh, that's what Nelson's talking about. Okay. I get it a little bit more, when he says that you have to use your imagination, I think my imagination, part of my brain had been shut off for a long time or something, and it just wasn't used to exercising that. And it took some time for me to start. Oh, that's just an analogy for me to help me understand this fact, or, these principles. And, so it takes time. And I try to encourage people all the time, read the book, read the book. I think they think I'm a broken record. And really, what am I going to get out of it reading again? Just read it again. Now you're paying a premium. It's going to sound different to you.
Going back to BYOB, it took me, I finally figured out that he's talking about life principles applied to finance is what he's talking about. So it's not just, okay, here's a principle for finance. Here's a principle for money. Here's a principle to become wealthy or whatever. These are life principles. Okay. Now think them through the lens of a banker and see how the money shakes out and who really is controlling the money supply at your level and who's profiting from that. So and so I didn't think like that for a long time. So I don't feel like the lone wolf there.
And you knew him personally, so.
I mean, it was, we spent, a couple hours every day together. And whenever I asked him a question, he never answered it.
That's right. He would answer you with a question and just be like maddening, right? I remember hearing that.
It was about self-discovery, I guess.
There were a couple things. Let me just say this about reading the book. I think you come to it with an approach. First of all, you have this traditional mindset of rate of return that you're coming to it with, but you're also expecting the book to be about finances and math. And it's not that. And then you see in the back of the book, he's got all of these book recommendations. And the more I've been in this, the more I've realized, Nelson had to be a very deep well. He had so much knowledge and understanding. And I think this is one of the things that I appreciate is that he was a solid Christian, but he was also a really deep thinker. And so I think that's part of it too, is like, he's coming from a place that most of us aren't coming from with that kind of depth of knowledge of things to be able to make those analogies. And I don't know, it's just a whole nother ballgame.
He learned from his mentors also. He, like everybody else, he picked up something from a mentor and plugged that into his thought process and his personal dynamic. So, just like all of us, we're all learning from somebody, and we take what we think is important and stick it where we think it goes in the whole equation. So the idea is to keep open and keep taking things and learning things and figuring out where they go. That's the hard part. And most people don't want to do it because it's causes them to, I guess, think too hard. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it, right? Like James, how much is that premium? What? No, that when I heard that, it's like a lot of folks that I talk to that are clients of practitioners, and they might come to a think tank or whatever as a guest or whatever, and they always come away as like, I didn't start big enough. Or a practitioner will come back and tell me, I didn't design a policy big enough for that client. Well, how do you know that? Because they came back and they say, how do I get more money in this thing? Because I need access to more money for X. And that's when I know it's like, yeah, you're right. So when you said James did that to me, that was like, of course he did, because he's a friggin' expert.
And I was overwhelmed by that. And yet I was looking for more the next year, not because it was filled up and overflowing. Really, honestly, it was just because of my understanding, like, oh, I'm looking down the road and I'm like, I want more of this, and I better do it while I can, while I'm young enough, and I'm going to make it happen somehow. Every year I'm like, I'm not sure how, but somehow.
Well, and you just recently launched your own podcast. Why don't you talk about that? What made you want to do that?
Well, because I just really, truly want to get the word out. And there's a couple of other motives. And I would say, number one, I really want my podcast to be something that my grandchildren, my great grandchildren down the future will have, to hear me speaking to them long after I'm gone. So I always try to keep that in mind when I'm speaking as well, because I really want to give them not only the inheritance with the dollars, but I want to give them the wisdom and the discipline and the understanding behind it as well. So that's one, honestly, a major purpose, besides the fact that I really wanted to also have a place to educate my clients. I don't talk to them every day. I wish they'd call me more often. So I'm throwing a podcast in their email on the regular, hoping they will listen and learn alongside me. So all of that, besides obviously just getting the word out there to others. So I'm excited to do it. It's a little nerve-wracking sometimes because there's a pressure to make sure you know what you're going to talk about next and getting that ready, but we're getting there and it's going. So I'm hoping it'll do the job for me.
That sounds great. I'm sure it'll be a big success because you're doing it for the right reasons. Well, as we wrap up our time together, will you please share with us what the infinite banking concept means to you?
I would say the infinite banking concept for me has given me a new way it's truly a lifestyle change. So it's given me a new way to think through, not only my finances, but what I'm doing with those finances, how they're being stewarded, where they're going, and for the purposes behind them. And I feel like that has given me a far more, not only hopeful, but more Christian manner in which to deal with my finances, quite honestly. In a way that I can be proud of and feel good about, knowing that it's more honest dealing. Quite frankly, that's the best way I can describe it. And can I just say something? Because I know we didn't talk about the fact that I didn't know Nelson because he passed by the time I learned about infinite banking. And you guys are all so privileged, by the way, to have had him in your life. But I just kind of wanted to add this because when the first time I saw that documentary and it opened up with the prayer, God our Father, and it goes on, there was just something when I watched that the first time and heard that just said, this is an unusual character. This is a man with depth, and I didn't know that much at the time, but I just had that sense, which made me just want to know more. And the more I have studied him and everything that he has taught, whether it's in Building Your Warehouse of Wealth, Infinite Banking, Becoming Your Own Banker book, or even in his lecture series, I think I have a copy of the video that is on DVD and I have to get out my Blu-ray player in order to play it, which I've done several times. Now I hear him speaking. I actually hear the sound of his voice when I'm reading the book, even though I've never met him. But there's been some things that have just struck me when I feel like when he talked about the snakes and dragons and getting the snakes and dragons out of our life, when I first heard that, I thought, well, isn't that cute? Isn't that quaint? Like, he's kind of joking, right? Or he's just kind of referring to the fact that they're taking a lot of interest from us for loans and stuff. And so, you're shaking your head because you know better. But I didn't know better, right? Like, I'm just learning and just getting to know Nelson through his books and these different things. But it has become so apparent to me that he had such a depth of understanding of what's going on in our economic world and even the spiritual undertones underneath it. I guess I'm just bringing this all up because this has been something that has really, really impacted me and made me realize this really is a mission for good. And I am so excited to be part of that mission. I wish I could have known him to have these conversations with him. You tell me more. I would love to hear more from you guys about him, but that's just what it strikes me as is this. I feel like he knew so much more than he ever wrote down. I don't know. and that there's just more under there. And I just want to dig into what's underneath there, because it really impresses me. And I think we see that even, I did a podcast on this recently about how he put his scripture verses in Becoming Your Own Banker. And the fact that he would just put like that little verse of John 5:6 at the top of the page at the problem. The more I thought through that, correct me if I'm wrong, but he just puts it there and doesn't say a word about it. And I have come to the conclusion that he puts it there as almost a teaser or an invitation to say, go ahead, pick up your Bible, open it up, read it, figure out why I put it there. And not only did he want us to know what it had to do with the problem, but I think he wanted us to know what it had to do with life. I don't know. But that's my impression of the kind of man he was. And that is something I can get behind.
Yeah. Well, he either started with the seminar or he started the first break with this. He said, what you can learn in the seminars is, what I think is like, something that's going to change your life, okay, financially. However, if you don't have a relationship with Christ, then it doesn't mean anything. So if you want to have a conversation with me about just understanding what that relationship with Christ looks like and how you need to pursue it, then I would love to spend some time with you, while I'm here with you, So, I mean, a lot of, so he's one of the guys that didn't just give it lip service. Okay. He walked with it. He really did. And it offended a lot of people. But so what? He was on a mission, like we all should be, to be more Christ-like, be disciples, and to evangelize, the gospel. So there you go. But I mean, that's what he was. And, he also was in the choir church, right? And so that was one of his real passions, was just to pick the choir. And I mean, when I talk about him being intentional about stuff and taking things from other sources and bringing them into his narrative, he actually took voice lessons. Okay, so I always thought he took voice lessons because he wanted to, solo in the choir. And again, just like your comment about the scripture in the problem chapter, it's like, Nelson, I always thought you took voice lessons because you wanted to sing. He goes, no. Because I wanted to be more effective in my 10-hour seminars and to learn how to breathe, learn how to project, and learn how to maintain a voice level over that long period of time. I mean, everything he did was intentional. It wasn't just like a little habit or whatever, or something that just like that became a habit. I mean,
so he didn't throw that little verse on there just to be clever or cute or quaint. It was intentional. Yeah.
Everything's intentional, but he did have a habit of omitting important, connections. Okay. With the assumption that somebody knew what he was talking about.